Okay, great. And we have some more people coming in. Hello, everyone. Please put your name in the chat and where you're from. We're going to get going. I'm so glad that you're here. Great. We've got some more people jumping in. Hello, welcome, everyone. Will you turn off videos and mute? And then I'd love to hear who you are in the chat. If you can just share who you are, name, where you're from, if you want to share how you're connected. I think it's good because I think it'll be just us and Kirsty now.
Okay.
All right, we are going to get started. Welcome, everyone. So glad that you're here. I am Sarah Prince. I'm going to have everyone on the panel introduce themselves, and then we have some great questions. If you have any questions as we're coming along, we'd love you just to put it in the chat, and I'll be checking those as we go along. We are so excited to be here with Parent Reality. I found this incredible organization a couple years ago, and just I'm surprised there's not more, but this is an incredible place for parents to get support, learn things, have community, and connect. Parent Reality does so many things. And so please, if you're not in one of our groups, if you're not connected to us online, we hope that you would do so after this because it's an incredible place to get support. So I am Sarah Prince. I am an author, pastor, life coach, and I've walked the journey of neurodivergent children for many years. I have now a 15-year-old and an 11-year-old. My son, who is now 11, diagnosed with autism at age 1.5. And then at age 5, he lost his official diagnosis. And now he is subclinical, is the new term I've learned, with ADHD and anxiety. So we see those symptoms, but we are kind of managing those ourselves, and he doesn't have a diagnosis. My daughter is 15, and she has a diagnosis of ADHD. I have a diagnosis of ADHD and generalized anxiety disorder. So yes, our house is chaos and fun and big feelings. And I love this topic of neurodivergent children and anxiety, but you're going to hear from some awesome people. So I'm going to let them introduce themselves. Huda, you want to say hi?
Hi, I'm Huda. I have a 12-year-old son. He was diagnosed with autism at age 4. He had normal development up until age 1, and then he started regressing. And then we just realized that something was wrong. He started having lots of meltdowns and tantrums, and we took him to a neurologist, and he was diagnosed with autism. And since then, yeah, we've been helping him along his journey. It's been a beautiful journey, but also very challenging. And we've learned a lot about ourselves and about him. Thank you.
Bianca, say hello.
Hi. So I'm Bianca. I am a teacher and grade head at an inclusive school. Over the past 8 years in teaching, I've worked with many neurodivergent children. Also have a background in psychology, and I'm currently pursuing my master's in education very slowly but steadily. Yeah.
Okay. And Kirsty, would you please introduce yourself? Can't hear you, sorry. Just unmute Kirsty quickly. All good. There we go.
Hi, I'm Kirsty Schlesinger. I'm a counselor and mediator. I live in Cape Town. I have an 18-year-old son with dyspraxia. So I have an understanding and a passion for neurodivergency and children who struggle and parents who struggle, to just cope and understand the journey and have hope for the future.
Amazing. Amazing. Thank you, everyone on this panel. I'm so excited. We're going to start with just a simple definition. I know all of you are probably familiar with this, but just in case if you're not, or you need a reminder of kind of what is a neurodivergent kind of model. What does that mean? What does that look like? So I'm just going to show you here. So basically the term neurodiversity was coined in the 1990s. It was helped to fight the stigma. There still is a stigma, but back then it was even more people who had autism. And that was kind of why it was begun. It wasn't just autism, but there was something bigger than autism, and promote acceptance. The neurodiversity movement was launched by Judy Singer, an Australian psychologist, sociologist who herself is on the autism spectrum. So now it is an umbrella. Often you'll see this umbrella that it includes ADHD, Tourette's, dyslexia, and a range of other neurodiverse conditions, which I love that it's now something much bigger than just autism or even ADHD. The main goal of this movement, it actually is a movement, and there's tons of acceptance and tons of resources online. Main goal is to shine a light on the benefits of diversity in the neurodivergent movement. There's a ton of books about this also. Please contact me if you want to know more about this. Neurodiversity has also evolved from a focus on individuals with a formal diagnosis of autism or ADHD and learning disorders, but to see a much broader thing. So as I said, my son, I see him as subclinical, but he still has a lot of symptoms of a neurodivergent profile. And so now this movement is trying to accept all people, find strengths and help weaknesses, and just grow towards that. So that is where we're beginning of what is neurodiversity. I'd love to begin with the people on this panel and just share about your diagnosis. Huda did that a little bit already. Share about the neurodivergent diagnosis you've experienced and where are you now? Kirsty, why don't you begin?
My son has dyspraxia, as I've mentioned. It's also known as developmental coordination disorder. And it's a neurological condition that affects physical coordination and motor skills. People with dyspraxia may struggle with tasks that require fine and gross motor skills, which can impact their daily activities and their academic performance and their social interactions. It's more commonly diagnosed in children, but as I've learned, it persists into adulthood. The treatment and diagnosis that's involved is by an educational psychologist and a neurodevelopmental psychologist generally. And then the therapies which follow to help children develop and grow is speech therapy, physiotherapy, occupational therapy, social skills groups, and of course, counseling.
Great. And your son, where's your son now? Talk about that just briefly.
He's working after completing a skills program at a remedial school. He struggles a lot with self-esteem, but through many challenges and successes and people involved in his growth and development, he is finding his way in the world. He's a very gentle soul who, like all children with dyspraxia, is well aware of his challenges. And he's known since he was 3.5 years old when he couldn't climb a jungle gym. And when he was 6 years old and he sat under a table refusing to work because he couldn't cope with the academic requirements in the first week of grade 1. So that's some of his history, but we're seeing many successes, and there's definitely hope at the end of the tunnel, where we always had a lot of anxiety about where he would end up in the world. And with his grade 4 level reading and writing, we've had much anxiety about where the world would take him.
Yeah, thanks, Kirsty. I love talking to you because I think so many parents are reaching out to Parent Reality when they're in the midst of a diagnosis or just trying to make it day by day. It's really encouraging to hear from a parent who has an adult child, and that there is hope. There's a lot of hope, actually. And our world is changing to embrace neurodivergent people more and more. So thank you. Okay, Huda, you want to tell us about Mika, where you guys are now? You said a little bit about the diagnosis. But
Yeah, sorry, I was a bit nervous.
you're perfect.
Okay, so I'm actually a mom of 2. I have a teenage daughter who's 15, and then I've got my son who's now 12, and he's on the autism spectrum. He was diagnosed with autism at age 4. But everything was normal in his development up until age 1. And then we started noticing that he was regressing. He stopped talking. He stopped eating most foods. And then at around age 2, he started getting these intense meltdowns. Like, we could actually see that he was just struggling to communicate, and he just didn't know how. He couldn't get the words out. And then we took him to a neurologist at Constantiaberg, where he was diagnosed with autism. And she recommended that we take him to a school of intervention called KidStart. And that was actually a great start to our journey, because we learned a lot about autism there. They offered a range of therapies like speech, OT, video modeling, and they also followed this curriculum called AIMS, which focused on the child's unique interests to learn. And by the end of that first year, KidStart then moved, and we had to find a creche for him or another school for him, and we took him to a creche in Noordhoek, which was actually really good for him, because they did a lot of sensory activities where they played outside in the sand and with animals. And that actually really helped stimulate him. Then we found a cottage school where he finally learned to read and write. At this stage, he could speak a little bit better. And then after COVID, we applied at Sun Valley Primary, and he was accepted in grade 3. And then they offered him facilitator support in class. At the moment, he's in grade 7, and he doesn't have a facilitator anymore. And we're now looking for high schools for him for next year.
Awesome. I love, Huda, your story, because you guys are such incredible parents, and you've just, continue to change as the needs change. With Micah, you just kind of, okay, now we're going to do this, now we're going to do this. And I'm sure each of those changes were very overwhelming and scary, but
Yeah.
you can look back and see how you really, each part of his development, you met him where he is. I think that's so important. So I shared a bit about our story. So my daughter, I mean, we thought she was just typical, normal. Only in grade 7 did she start showing real signs of ADHD. We'd kind of joke, oh, you're kind of ADHD, your room's messy. Then in grade 7, we really saw signs of ADHD, and it wasn't just a messy room. It was actually emotional outbursts. She couldn't regulate in situations. She was having trouble with friends, which is a big thing with ADHD in girls. And so we got her a diagnosis of ADHD in grade 7 with an educational psychologist. And it really helped because actually we realized she was underperforming in school and with her academics. But it's really, really helped her regulation and her friendships. That's the biggest challenge she's had in her diagnosis. And so anxiety shows up big time in her, which we're going to talk about next. Then my son, as I said, diagnosed at 1.5. He was in an incredible creche from the beginning. They just brought in all these different therapies. We had therapy all day. It was at creche, then it was after creche. He only started talking at about 2.5, but we did literally every kind of therapy, video modeling, speech therapy, OT, integrated behavior therapy, and then took him to this inclusive school at Grade R where he met Bianca, and he still was on the autism spectrum at that point, but he only needed an OT then, and now is integrated wonderfully into the school he's at. But as I said, we're still seeing symptoms, which I'm so grateful as a parent to know and accept these symptoms of ADHD, symptoms of autism, symptoms of anxiety, and not be scared of them, but just always monitoring, always looking, seeing what is going on, especially at a time like right now, exams in our school, highly charged for kids that are neurodivergent. So it's really important that we've been walking that journey. So that's where we are now. So I want to shift and now just give a kind of blanket talk about what is anxiety. We're talking about neurodivergent children and anxiety. So just some key definitions of what is anxiety. As you see here, this is kind of a big thing, a lot of information, but there's actually a DSM. That's when you go to a counselor, a psychologist, a general practitioner, and get a diagnosis. GAD, which is generalized anxiety disorder, that's what I have. That means every day there's anxiety in my body. And so this is something that you're seeing more than just situationally. And as you can see, restlessness, getting tired easily. So those are things that are just kind of you're seeing in your child or yourself kind of every day for a long period of time. And then in neurodiverse children, which is what we're going to talk about, again, we're not experts. We're just here to share our experiences and how we see it, and help you find just community, that you're not alone in these things. But it can look different in a neurodiverse child. Obviously, if you have a pre-verbal child or adult, it's going to look very different. But you're going to see things like sudden bursts of anger, decreased school performance, physical symptoms is a big one, stomach aches, headaches. We see that a lot in my family, isolation, changes in eating or sleeping, being overly clingy. I'm just kind of going down the list, self-destructive behaviors, and sudden fear of things like school, people, normal places. So these are just possible ways you could see anxiety. And so as it says in the top there, anxiety is emotion characterized by feelings of tension, worried thoughts, and physical changes inside the body. So it can be a situation like exams that causes it, or it can be something that's just always kind of there. As an expert, it's hard even as an expert to define all these things. And we have a DSM, there's a way to diagnose, but it's actually often first as parents that we're seeing these symptoms. And that's why we're having this conversation is we're the first line in the first place. And also the classroom is also a place where these symptoms are coming out. So it looks different in every child, but these are some markers to start to be curious and start to ask the questions, are we seeing anxiety? Okay, so I want to talk about moms navigating neurodivergent kids and anxiety. Again, it could be always anxiety present or anxiety in situations. Kirsty, would you explain how it shows up for your son, how you've seen anxiety, show up in different ways?
I think a lot of what you said when you gave this definition and the signs of anxiety, but for Joel, during his school years, he exhibited sadness and moodiness, anger and aggression, and a lot of the time his talk was hopelessness, worthlessness, and he had a lot of difficulty coping with anxiety. His behavior at times was of a self-destructive nature. He'd lash out at other children and even at times hit or punch other children, and including on one occasion a girl. This was due to the children at the remedial school, who a lot of them were on the spectrum, struggled to respect his personal boundaries. He very much would isolate himself, go climb a tree when he wasn't coping with academics, and just needed to be alone. And the children would bother him. And over time, when he struggled to communicate what he was feeling, because communication and finding the words was difficult for him, then he tried to tell us, tried to tell the teachers, and eventually just lash out. And that was his way of showing his frustration. And, you know, for us, there was quite a lot of guilt because we didn't always pick up the signs. We had to learn to pick up the signs. And I think the biggest expression of his anxiety was when sort of depression came, and he put a rope around his neck and stood on a chair, and one of his friends came in and have stopped him. You know, the biggest problem with children with dyspraxia is self-esteem. It's actually one of the diagnostic criteria. But now as he's matured, he's sort of found his words, and he's much more open to talking about things that are happening in his life and his feelings. And it's sort of great because as I said, as he's matured, those sort of that anxiety and those things that he was feeling seem to have faded away when he talks.
Wow. Wow. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you for being so open. I think that's really important to see how scary it can be. And I think so many parents can relate to feeling of shame when you don't catch it early enough and you feel like you missed something and then you're kind of on the back foot. So thank you for sharing that. And again, giving us hope for the future. Huda, will you explain how you see anxiety in your child?
Okay, so as a little child, Mika experienced anxiety, and it played out in many different ways. He would have a meltdown in the mall or in the shop when we would take a detour coming home from school. Or it would show up when we were around a lot of people or in a space that was overstimulating with bright lights or loud noises, that sort of thing. It would show up if my husband and I were under pressure to try and get done to go somewhere quickly. And it would show up in his fears around getting older, and he would attribute that to death. Or he would have these real big fears about losing me or his father. At the moment, his anxiety is mostly around exams and when he's under a lot of pressure in class, and especially when he feels misunderstood. He struggles with executive function because of the increasing workload at school at the moment. And he has major anxiety when he breaks things and when he feels like he's disappointed people and when he feels like a failure. From the beginning, the first thing that we did to help him with anxiety was to develop a routine with him. So if the plan was to go to school and come home, we would just do that. We would try not to, divert from that route, unless we could prepare him beforehand. We made sure that he had a supportive environment and that he felt accepted and included at home. We validated his emotions. If he was having a hard time, we'd allow him to cry and, calm down when he was ready. We helped him to find ways to manage his anxiety. We would light a candle and let him blow it out over and over again because we didn't know how to explain deep breathing to him when he was nonverbal. So that was the way that actually really helped. And we'd provide him with toys like Play-Doh or bubbles that would help calm him down. We also use lots of positive reinforcement with him. So I would always tell him, I'm so proud of you. I'm so proud of you. Even if he couldn't speak, I knew he could understand me. And we'd prepare him for social interactions, and we'd tell him that he has autism, that he's different, but he's unique and he's special. And my husband and I also had to really learn to work on our anxiety so that we could be calm for him. And as a family, we all had to be on the same page when we were dealing with him.
Everyone see why Huda's on this panel? We are in a support group together at our kids' school. And every time I hear from Huda and your husband, I'm like, can I write that down? So wise. And I just admire how you've empowered yourself to learn what your son needs. And if you know one child with autism, you know one child with autism, but Huda and her family have really enabled and engaged him in what he needs and learned so much. And it's really encouraging. Even that candle thing, that's such a cool idea. I love that. I love that. I love that. Okay, so how does anxiety show up? It's every stage is different. I mean, Kirsty, as you shared too, it's every stage is different. I'll speak to right now. My son, who I said is preclinical, he needs to know what's happening tomorrow. Mama, what's happening tomorrow? What are we eating? Am I going to go here? Like he needs to know things to kind of settle his brain every night. What are we doing tomorrow? Are you going to make me this? Like and recently, because he's had symptoms of like stomach cramps, stomach pains, we've been trying to go take out gluten. He hates it. He can't handle the change. So he keeps hiding his sandwiches. We found multiple sandwiches yesterday that were literally, when we threw them away, they were dust. I don't know what that is. It should have been a science experiment. They turned to brown dust. Because he was so anxious of the difference in his foods, he couldn't even talk to me about it. So it's little things with Keller, but it's there. And I notice it. And it's not, to me, he's not being annoying that he's asking these questions every day. He needs it to kind of settle himself. Now, my daughter, we didn't see any of the signs for a long time, which that I have guilt, or had guilt about when we did get a diagnosis, because we thought she was just great. Everyone loved her. She was thriving everywhere. And where we first started to see anxiety was at school, which we're going to get Bianca to share about in a little bit. Actually, when all this was happening, I was, Bianca, help me, help us. Because we noticed outbursts happening at school and then complete meltdowns happening after school. And we're not talking about a nonverbal kid. We're talking about a very verbal, like top of the class, winning every award kid. That's why this conversation is so important, because it presents so differently. So my daughter literally always winning awards, always performing, always kind of at the front of the class with the answer. And yet at school, we started to see these outbursts with other kids. There were not fist fights, but she was fighting with them. They were fighting with her. The teacher was trying to kind of quell these things and couldn't, because it was just so much. It's also girls. It's also girls, teen girls, preteen girls. But we noticed it first in the classroom. And then after school, she would just melt down because she was trying so hard to keep everything together at school. She was coming apart and almost having panic attacks. At times, they were panic attacks in the car on the way home. And so it was a really difficult thing that actually was a part of our diagnosis, because she was so anxious at school that she couldn't even control herself. And what we still see is with friendships for her, she really struggles with anxiety around that. And she has to kind of process after and prepare herself before. And unfortunately, what we see her doing is a lot of masking with friends and trying to keep it together and not be too bossy and not be too know-it-all and not have, say too much and be the chill girl that you're supposed to be as a teenage girl. So she's trying to mask and keep it together. And then recently she came from a weekend away with friends, and everything kind of blew up when she got to me, because she was trying to hold it together. And so this is what kids are facing. It's hard, and all you can do is kind of help them prepare and then process it after. But it's big anxiety moments for them, big things that are happening. Okay, I want to shift and talk about the classroom, because that's a place where my daughter's anxiety really showed up. In any kid that's neurodivergent, there's going to be things going on in the classroom. So let's talk. First, just what I love about our school is the teachers often don't get the profile before of the kid, unless it's really severe. Basically, they want the kid just to go in and the teacher just to make an assessment. So Bianca came to me maybe weeks or months into that, and she said, "Does Keller have autism?" And I was like, yes. And because they, especially the beginning, they want to just kind of meet the kids, which is really cool. But how do you see neurodivergent kids? Because obviously, if you're aware of what it is, you start to see it. How does it show up in the classroom where you're kind of like, ding, 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 I see it here, in just kind of general ways?
Yeah, so I think obviously, as you mentioned, neurodivergence is an umbrella term for a lot of things. So there's no kind of hard and fast rule of how it shows up in the classroom. But I think there's a number of things for me as a teacher. And as Sarah said, we do have a handover from the previous teacher, and usually our kind of feel is give it about 2 weeks, get to know the kids on your own. So the sort of things that I pick up is obviously academic sort of progress is a big one. Maybe kids that are not meeting requirements, aren't able to keep up, are very overwhelmed by the academic workload. Or it could be a lot more nuanced than that. You could have a child that's absolutely gifted and excelling in a certain area, or hyper-focused, has a very specific interest, but completely disinterested in other things. Or a child that's incredibly creative, but can't get the information from the head to the page. Very, very bright children that just can't, are not necessarily able to translate that into being book smart. So that's a big factor. The other thing is like the physical symptoms. I teach grade 3. So as much as, you know, in the 21st century with schooling, we want kids to be up and moving and we want them to be active learners, there is still a large, you know, part of time in the classroom that requires a child to sit at a desk and, you know, not talk unless it's their turn to talk. So you'll see it with children who are just running about when it's not expected. They are jumping on the desk, they're donkey kicking off the wall. You know, they're blurting things out, shouting out when it's not appropriate, when they're not expected to do that. Yeah, that I would say is quite a big one. And then social, I think some children who are neurodivergent really struggle socially. They can't make meaningful connections with peers. Sometimes they can't quite pick up on social cues. So they're just struggling to make meaningful relationships with the other children. And then, of course, emotional is a big one. Emotional, anxiety, behavioral. So sometimes you'll have a child who is melting down, or lashing out, kicking, punching, hitting, those sorts of things, or just a child who is incredibly anxious. Maybe, you know, they are so overwhelmed with trying to get through the workload, and it's such a big struggle for them that they are just having, you know, tears and meltdowns. You see the emotional meltdowns. So yeah, it's all the things. But also sometimes I think it's important to note that sometimes it doesn't present at all. I've had parents where I've sat in front of them and I've had like the Kierans in my class where I've said, your child's amazing. They are beautifully behaved. They're just an all-star student. And the moms are like, no. They are at home a mess. So I think it was really important what you said about parents being the first line, because I think as a teacher, there's so much that you can pick up in the classroom. But I think, yeah, it's definitely the partnership is so important, because for me, you know, I teach 8 and 9-year-olds. So by the time I've got a child, you know, you as the parent has already known them for 8 years. So as much as I like to, you know, get to know the kids on my own, form my own things, there's also so much that can be learned by partnership with parents. Sometimes the way that these things play out at school and the way they play out at home are completely different. So yeah, I'm sure we'll discuss more around that as we carry on. Yeah.
So good. I love that, because the classroom is such an important place. And I think for a lot of parents, it's like this goal of like, and Kirsty, we're going to hear from you about this in a minute, but it's like this goal of like, I need to get my child in the class. You have this idea as a parent, like this is what you need to do as a child, be a successful child in a class. And it just looks so different. And it might be the most successful child in a class, but at home they're melting down. And it might be they're never, you know, they're struggling in a class, but that's actually, they're doing the best they can. That's worth celebrating. So I think the partnership is so important. And I think it's important. I mean, I wish all teachers had an education in neurodivergent brains, because I think teachers miss a lot. You know, my daughter was just looking like she was melting down and she was over emotional. And actually it was a neurodivergent brain, which is so different. And not that every teacher should diagnose that, but I just think to ask the question, is it something more than just kids having kids problem, right? That was an important thing that happens a lot with ADHD girls, is kind of girl on girl fighting. It wasn't just normal, it was heightened. And so it's a great thing for teachers to know this. I would love every teacher to know about this. Okay, so Huda, I'd love for you, you know, you talked about being in different schools. Talk about, from what you know, obviously you're not sitting with Micah in the class. What do you see with him? Because we wanted to talk about our experiences, we're not experts. What do you see with him sitting in a class, an inclusive big class, 30 kids? What do you hear are his anxieties? What do you hear are his strengths being in this kind of environment?
Okay, so I just want to jump back to what you said about masking, because Mika used to do that a lot. And in fact, from the very beginning, the whole point about him driving home and detouring, that whole thing was also about anxiety. And also it would happen after school. So it meant that he was holding himself together. So when we would actually drive home was when he felt most comfortable to just let it all out with me, because he felt safe with me. Yeah, and that's quite important. So even after he started at Sun Valley, when he would come home, he would be so frustrated and irritable, and it would all come out. But now what he's doing is when he comes home, he actually goes straight to sleep. He'll first have something to eat and then he'll go to sleep. He'll sleep for like an hour. And I think that is what he needs to actually get over how he had to hold it together for the day. But in school, what I've noticed that he has a lot of anxiety around making friends, because he struggles with social cues. Even though he loves school, he loves being around a lot of kids, but he does struggle with making friends and understanding those social cues. And also like the kids have started to notice differences in him now that he's in grade 7. They're all older now. They're more vocal, they're more opinionated. So they comment about these differences, and it actually makes him feel very self-conscious and anxious about himself as well. And if he does something wrong, they run to the teacher immediately, and that makes him feel like a failure. And, like all those feelings come up again. What the teacher has suggested is us using like red and green cards. So if he has an issue, he can just put up the card so he doesn't have to make it known to the classroom that he's actually struggling. But yeah, emotions are a big factor at the moment, especially because he's a preteen and their emotions are all over the place. And he's starting to notice that his peers are changing and that they are starting to feel, or be opinionated and different, very different. And that's causing him a lot of anxiety as well. But yeah.
Yeah, I love it. And I love that he can talk about it. And I love that it's almost like an accepted thing. It's a lot for him to be at school. So he comes home and he sleeps. You told me that the other day, and I was like, that's brilliant, because his brain, of course, just needs to like be quiet, and then he can study and go back. Yeah, I love talking about this inclusive school that Bianca teaches at and that our kids are at, because I think they really make an effort to be inclusive. And some teachers do it better than others. Bianca is going to talk about that in just a minute, but I think they really try. But there is a point where your child is going to notice, if they're not making the same friends, if people are responding differently, if people act differently. When they're younger, they don't notice as much, but they will notice at a point, and it's another thing to manage, another thing to talk through, and it's just part of the reality. But I think a lot of the teachers at Sun Valley at our school really try to make it a place that kids are accepted. So Bianca, I'd love for you to talk about that now. So we talked about neurodivergent kids. Talk about when you see anxiety in kids that are neurodivergent in the classroom. It's obviously very specific, but maybe also how you try to make it an inclusive place where things are more accepted and kids feel accepted and kind of take that weight off.
Well, to start with anxiety in the classroom, I was a very, very anxious child. I've grown into an anxious adult. So I feel, yeah, I think that I can identify with those kids. I was a high performing student. I was that child that teachers would say, oh, she's amazing. But I was really, really struggling and very, very anxious as a child. So when I see that in a kid, I just try. I think the biggest thing with anxiety that I remember, and even as an adult that I still struggle with, is the fear that's associated with, like, you're anxious and you're fearful because you just think these are big feelings. And so I think the biggest thing with kids who I see in the classroom who are super anxious is just trying to make them feel safe and not to take the feelings away, because it's something that we all need to learn to navigate, but just to sit there with kids in it, sit in it with them and talk to them and be like, you know what, I understand that feeling. And children, obviously, they're young, but they can understand their feelings to a certain extent. As Sarah has mentioned, it often comes across as, my tummy is aching, I'm missing my mom. It's things like that. And then we talk about it. Okay, maybe you're feeling a little bit anxious. That's okay. It's going to get better. Like, we talk about the things we can do and the strategies. So really just to try and be with them in that moment. And then with regards to making the classroom a place where everyone can feel accepted, I think that's the goal of teachers, right? Neurodivergent children or not, you want to make your classroom a place where everybody feels loved, everybody feels safe, everybody feels included. So I think a big thing is to just have a lot of dialogue around difference and not to make it something that we shy away from. Like, I talk to my kids all the time about how we all have strengths, we all have weaknesses. I talk to them about the things I struggle with because, at 8 years old, they think that I am like, I know everything. If I tell them I don't know something, they're like, that's clearly not correct. You are a teacher. So I talk a lot about things I struggle with. I've been telling them I've been trying to go running and I'm absolutely terrible at it, and the kids find it hilarious. So we talk a lot about it. And when there's kids that are saying, oh, this is easy, I'm like, remember, it's not easy for everyone. We all have strengths. We all have weaknesses. And that's just a constant dialogue in our class. We talk about the things that we've achieved really well as a class and the things that we're working on. We talk about our wins and our losses. And I think that's important because all the children can see that even Joe Soap, the top achieving kid, is also struggling with something. So I think that's a big, just general thing. And then with neurodivergent kids specifically, I think a big thing is trying to meet them where they're at, which is not always easy when you have 32 kids and you have the demands of a curriculum and the demands of a school day. But I think there's a lot of small things because we do expect neurodivergent kids to meet us where we're at a certain point. So we need to also try and come to them. And there's a lot of small things you can do. Just to give some examples, I taught a few years ago, I had a severely autistic child in my class. He couldn't read or write. He was verbal to an extent, but really struggled with self-expression. And really struggled, had a lot of sensory issues, and used to really struggle in the classroom with the noise, and just would always be hiding under the desk and things like that. And the one day he came in with a cardboard box, and he sat in the cardboard box, and he told me he's going to sit in the box today. And initially I was like, you're not going to sit in a box. And then I thought, actually, you can sit in the box. He sat in the box and he was happy. He loved it. He did his work. He didn't bother anyone. He enjoyed the box. And he just sat there, and it gave him that feeling of comfort and that, close space that he needed. And that was great. This year I've got a little boy who's got quite strong symptoms of ADHD. He's not formally diagnosed, but we're kind of in the process of that. But he really struggles with impulse control. It's a huge, huge thing. He really struggles to stay seated. He wants to run around. He really struggles with speaking when he's not supposed to speak, blurting out. And it's quite funny because we've been doing assessments. And in grade 3, I'm still reading the papers to the children, reading the questions to them. And it's not so great when you've got a kid shouting out every answer and he's correct. So he's literally going. And I'm like, oh my word. So, there's just little things we do. Like, he's got little incentives. We've got these little, he absolutely loves bugs. He's passionate about bugs. So we made these little bugs that come out. They're called quiet critters, and they come out on his desk, and they get to sit there when he's quiet and not blurting out. We have little, he gets little blurt beans to remind him not to blurt out. He's got like a little star chart and rewards and all these things, and we celebrate him. And, that's just one way of showing him we recognize this is hard for you, and we're going to love you when you succeed in that. And the other kids, I don't celebrate 32 of them when they don't shout out. They're expected not to, because for them, that's not a challenge. So same way, I'm not going to let 32 of them bring in a cardboard box. But I think it's just like seeing the kids and seeing what they need. And if there's little things that you can do to accommodate them, that's a big one. And then just one last thing is, I think a massive thing in the classroom to make every child feel included is to provide an opportunity for every child to taste success. And that obviously looks really different for different kids. Not all children are going to achieve outstanding results academically. But if you've got a child who's amazing at art, find a way to celebrate them, or amazing doing things in gymnastics outside of school, find a way to celebrate them. A hiker, kids try and lean into what they're interested in, where they're achieving. And sometimes it's really tiny things. I taught a child a few years back who was had a whole bunch of kind of learning needs and really, really struggled, wasn't sporty, didn't struggle to connect with the kids, but he loved magic and he learned magic tricks, and that was like his big thing. So every Friday would give him like 10 minutes to do a little magic show for the class, and they would cheer for him. And he just really felt like that was what he could offer the class, is like, I'm going to, put on my show. Had another little boy a few years back who also really, really struggled, had a lot of needs, but was absolutely obsessed with armadillos and just learned and absolutely knew everything about them. So we had like Tuesday News Day where he could stand up and give a little presentation about armadillos. And like, maybe these children aren't achieving in the typical way, but there's still a way that we can celebrate them and show their successes and make them feel a part of something and make them feel that they have something to offer. And every child does. And some kids, it's very obvious and very easy. And others, you need to look a little bit harder and create spaces. But yeah, I'd say that's what it's about. Yeah.
No, they were all Miss Burridge's. Oh, so good. I love it. Thank you for all those stories too. It's so good. Armadillos. I love that. I love that. And I think it doesn't take a lot for teachers, educators, and even parents just to lean into, what your kids like. My son is right now obsessed with soccer information. And so we watch soccer documentaries together. I hate it. But you just lean into where they're at. So thank you for that. Okay, so Kirsty, I'd love to hear from you again. So you had your son in many different schools, different educational pathways, and eventually found an online place that really suited him. But part of it was he was anxious, it wasn't fitting. Will you talk about that? And how you kind of figured out what the right educational path was for him so he felt calm and content and could go forward?
I think it's important to mention that inclusive schools is not for every child. It's not for every faculty.
Yep.
And Joel had an average IQ, so the frustration for him was great because he understands and perceives everything that he learns, except he can't translate it onto paper. So he started at a pre-primary school, and it was a godsend because at 3.5, the teacher picked up that there was a difficulty, and she suggested that we get him assessed. Dyspraxic children often get diagnosed late, and the important thing with dyspraxia is early intervention. So he had speech therapy, occupational therapy, physiotherapy, every kind of therapy that you could have. And he was supposed to not be able to ride a bicycle, and Joel can ride a bike, a skateboard. So that early intervention was very good and, brought about very positive outcomes. But he went to Herzliya for part of his pre-primary and then went into grade 1. And as I mentioned earlier, he didn't even cope with grade 1 in the first term or first week. And they put him into their assisted learning class with a facilitator. I try not to see the choices that we made at the time as mistakes and part of the journey of finding the right fit for him. And it was an absolute disaster. Those children were isolated from the other children because they were the children with special needs. That was what they were known as at the school. So that inclusive education didn't work for Joel emotionally at all, or for his self-esteem. His facilitator, he didn't like his facilitator, so he would hit her, overturn tables when he couldn't do something. And we only found out more recently that his facilitator used to manhandle him. So she'd pull him around, hold him by the scruff of his neck, throw him around when he wouldn't do the work. So, and we didn't know this. So a lot of his behavior sort of came out of the fact that he didn't always gel with the people that we had helping him. So, for example, if his teacher had a high-pitched voice, he just shut down. He wouldn't do anything with them. He refuses to read with me even now because he thinks I have an annoying voice when I get a teacher. So we're busy doing his learners, which he's doing on Mondays, doing the oral test, and he does not want to do it with me, but we've had to persevere. Anyway, so when Joel was about in grade 5, I think, what would have been grade 5, it was suggested by the educational psychologist that we put him into a full remedial school. So he went to Edu Excellence, and Edu Excellence, he had his ups and downs. A teacher with an annoying voice, he would just shut down in the class. But as he got older, he was put into this, the academics didn't work for Joel at all. So they wanted him to repeat. So we actually said to them, no, he's not going to repeat. And we decided with the school to drop the academics and for him to go into the ASDAN skills program, which was a very slow process with Edu Excellence. If he didn't like the teacher, as I said already, he wouldn't do work with them. And eventually he was put into a class with this wonderful teacher called Bronwyn Hibbins, and she just loved him. And she had soft and gentle nature, and he really responded to her. So he was able to focus on reading with her and focus on the ASDAN with her. And he got his bronze with Edu Excellence. But he was very, very unhappy at Edu Excellence. So it came about that the reading teacher, which he had at the time, over and above what the school was offering, also didn't want to read with her because she had an annoying voice. She told us about this teacher in Claremont who offered a remedial education, a small cottage school. And when he hit the goal at Edu Excellence, we just thought we have to move him. And he was so unhappy there. He'd come home, get into bed, and he just wasn't coping at all there. Every day, I hate school, I don't want to go to school, and all this sort of isolated behavior just increased as he got into his teens. so we sent him to the school a lot. It was not last year, the year before. So he'd attend there 1 day a week, and then he would work online with a lot of support. And he just flourished. He wasn't in an environment where he had all this input from other children. And he was actually doing a lot online on his own. And she said to us that he can do much more than he lets on, or much more than when any of us have realized, because he's been wrapped in cotton wool. He hasn't been given the opportunity to work on his own and to thrive on his own. So in a year, he completed his silver and his gold ASDAN, which was an amazing achievement because it took him years at Edu Excellence to get the bronze. And now he finished school on a Wednesday and started working at World of Birds on a Friday. So, and that's also been a process in itself, getting used to work life. But I suppose the point of it is you have to find the education path for your child that works. I hope that was helpful in highlighting the remedial journey.
So helpful, really helpful, because obviously at every school there's kids that are thriving. And so it's for you as a parent to listen to your kid and to figure out what's real, like, not working, and when to push. It's so hard. And school refusal is actually a huge thing now because of COVID. And it's just a lot of kids are refusing school. So that's a very familiar path for a lot of parents. But you've just got to navigate when to push and when to say, okay, I hear you. And we're not going to always get it right either, which is hard. I mean, I think every parent of a neurodivergent kid, we have the things that we've done wrong and we've learned from them. And, you just have to keep going and being kind to yourself also. So thank you for sharing that. I love your journey in World of Birds. I need to go visit him. Okay, so I want to, as parents, to end with some wins. I'd love to hear from us three. What are a story of your child overcoming anxiety and you shared a lot. Obviously your son's overcome a lot, Kirsty, but maybe we'll start with you. What's a story of Micah overcoming?
So yeah, firstly, I just want to agree with Kirsty wholeheartedly. Like if you not all schools are meant for our children. Like Micah was at an inclusive school, at a school for special needs, and he actually got hurt there, and we actually had to take him out of the school because it wasn't good for him. And so we found that like finding good schools or therapists or good educators or anyone that supports us, that is inclusive but supportive, but also challenges him, and not also, like you say, wraps him with cotton wool, because that doesn't, we don't achieve anything in that kind of environment. And then we find that he thrives because he feels happy and he feels safe. And it's really been like a journey of like trying to find the way for him where he is happy, because sometimes you think it looks like the ideal school, but then it ends up not being. So like Sun Valley has really been that type of school for Micah, but they haven't wrapped him in cotton wool, So like in the beginning, they used to change facilitators like regularly, and then they wouldn't notify us, and Micah would have like such a meltdown, or he'd be so stressed about it because he got used to the facilitator. So I explained to the school that changes like children on the spectrum don't handle change very well, and if they could please let us know before they changed the facilitator. And they did, and then I would be able to prepare Micah a little bit better for it. But the changes in the facilitators actually helped Micah to get used to change a bit more, and he felt a bit less anxious about it. Then last year, when we decided that we were going to go without facilitator, it actually worked out nicely because the facilitator was going to go on maternity leave, and we were going to take the opportunity to try. Within the first month or two, Micah was really struggling, and then the teacher asked if we could get another facilitator to assist him. And we asked, look, can you just give him some more time to adjust to this change? And she allowed it. And by the end of the term, he had progressed so well. He'd actually gotten so used to it that the teacher was blown away by the progress. And now he's able to work on his own. And that's really increased his confidence. And it's also reduced his anxiety, which is a huge win, Another huge win was finding a really good speech therapist. We had Carol Mason. She was amazing. She gave us homework, to teach him, because he was really struggling with speech in the beginning. And now he no longer needs speech therapy anymore. And he's able to verbalize how he feels when he feels anxious. We can talk about like strategies on how to reduce his anxiety. And that's been a huge win, like for his anxiety. over this journey, what we've realized that has helped reduce his anxiety was a few things. Instead of focusing on like his specific stages of development, we focused on his growth instead, because while other kids were reaching milestones at specific ages, Mika was not. His came like years later, but we just kept going, and that really helped. We also noticed that Mika needed a unique approach to learning, because if we tried to force him to learn something in a certain way, it would just increase his anxiety. And then we had to adjust like tasks and activities and things that we were doing so that Mika could participate, which helped him to feel less stressed and, safer. And then we focused on the skills that Mika was most passionate about to get him to engage with us. And we just never try to change him in any way. We celebrate his uniqueness and accept him for who he is.
Brilliant. You are brilliant at that. Kirsty, any wins that you've seen with your son overcoming? We've heard some, but.
I think him experiencing successes and achievements helped him to overcome the anxiety, as well as just growing up and maturing and seeing the world and his difficulties through his own eyes. And I think as he's grown up, he's learned to accept that he has dyspraxia and he doesn't fight it as he used to. It takes time, and it has taken time, and he's done his best on the most part, and he's just persevering now.
It's amazing. Yeah, my kids have a lot of wins in their anxiety. And I think I was talking to a parent last night about exams, and she was talking about how stressed she is and then how stressed her kids get. And they're like, no, I don't want to do that. And I don't want to, there's this kind of, power struggle. And I was saying, I think I anticipate that studying for exams and knowing all this information and being set, I anticipate it being a big thing. So we just like set out lots of time for studying. And it's just kind of like what we do, like weeks before exams start, we're just Kieran and Keller are both studying at night, and we just, set them up for success. So Keller likes me to sit near him, and then he likes us to quiz later, but he, I think, prefers me over my husband. So I win in that one, but because I think my husband's more like, come, and I'm just kind of easygoing. I try to keep it really easygoing, but we set them up for success, which is a lot of time. And I sit with my son, and then my daughter, she likes being in a room. She has multiple like monitors. She has like a computer, a monitor, iPad, a phone, and her study stuff in every color. And she just like needs to be like geeked out in everything. And then she just feels comfortable and she feels confident in studying because her brain is like pew, pew, like firing at a million miles a minute. So she needs a lot of stimulus and have a place where she can really go and succeed. And now I'm finding her going to friends if she needs help on a certain part of the subject, which she did recently. So kind of having a very calm environment and kind of preparing them to, we're studying, this is good, it's okay, has helped both of them just to really feel confident and not have anxiety around something that all kids have anxiety. They're just going into it confident, but it's us kind of participating in what kind of space they need. And that's been really fun to see them do their best. All we need is for them to do their best and give their best effort. It's not compared to anyone else. So I'm really proud of them and how they're going confidently into these academic places that I wouldn't have their confidence, but I create the peace that helps them. Okay, final thing. I'd love to hear from you, Bianca, finally. You have a heart to see neurodivergent kids flourish. I've experienced this personally, as she actually taught my son twice. What would you say from a teacher who cares about this? What would you want to know, us parents, to know about neurodivergent kids and anxiety and flourishing? What would you tell us?
Well, I think as already discussed, I mean, it is really important to find the right environment and the right school for your child. And that's true of any child. A neurotypical child might thrive in one school and not thrive in another. So that's not like, unique to a neurodivergent child. I think it's for any child, find the right environment for your kid is super, super important. I think for me, the biggest thing is like, partner up with your child's teacher. We really want to partner with you. I think nobody goes into teaching for, the fame and money. Like most teachers are there because they really care about children and they really want to see children thrive. And if you're teaching in a mainstream school, most teachers have had very limited exposure to specific training in teaching kids with special needs and things like that. And even when you have, children, neurodivergent children are so different. I've taught a few autistic children and they've been completely different. So I think the thing for me is partner with your child's teacher, communicate, tell them what your kid likes, tell them what presses their buttons, tell them how to get them motivated, tell them things that you've won, wins at home, losses at home. Help us, because yeah, we want to partner with you. I think, that's a big thing. I think something that I like to always tell parents is like, a lot of parents will be very worried about the other children in the class and how's my kid going to be received. And I think I always like to offer a little bit of comfort in that regard, because I just see, and I know as kids get older, it can be a little bit different, but in my class, I've seen over and over and over again, the way that children will embrace other kids. And it's the most special and the most comforting thing. For example, this year, I've got a child who has recently been diagnosed with dyslexia. So he's now had the concession to allow him in exams or assessment tasks to have a reader. And because we don't always have the manpower, he's able to use an iPad, which can read to him. So once this all got approved, the iPad came to the class and we're starting a comprehension. I'm like, okay, cool, get the iPad. And then I suddenly thought, oh, I haven't really sort of broached this with the class. So I just said, okay, guys, just to let you know, so-and-so learns a little bit differently when it comes to reading. So he's going to be using an iPad. And that was it. And we're talking about an iPad with 9-year-old kids. And I didn't have one child go, that's not fair. I want to use an iPad. Why? Nothing. They're just kind of like, cool. And now he uses the iPad. And there has been nothing. The kids are just like, that's cool. And I know that's not always the case. I know that there are things of children that are mean. And, of course there are issues. But overall, kids' natural response is to be kind and to include and to love. And like the boy I discussed earlier, when we celebrate him for not shouting out, other kids aren't sitting there like, well, I didn't get a star for not shouting out. Like, they get it and they're the first ones to clap and just. So I think I would encourage parents to take comfort in that, in the sense that, like, there are a lot of teachers that want to embrace your child. There are a lot of kids that want to embrace your child. There's families that want to embrace your child. And I think also just to encourage parents to lean into intervention. I know, it's often costly and there's a lot of hurdles, but I think, the most successes that I've seen with neurodivergent children is like, really just lean in. If they need a certain therapy, that's awesome. Like, let's do it. Let's help them. If a child breaks their leg, there's no problem taking them to the physio to get them up and running again. So it's like, just lean into what your child needs. And yeah, just partner with your child's teacher and find the right space for your child, because I do think that, not every school, not every teacher, not every place is right for every child. I mean, naturally, teachers have a personality and you don't click with every child in the class. You make an effort to, of course, but naturally, maybe your voice is annoying. You're not going to click with everyone. But I truly believe there are spaces that for every child. So I think, yeah, seek it out, find it, and partner with the teachers, because we want to partner with you.
Your voice is never annoying, Bianca. That can never be true. Okay, well, we are at the top of the hour, and so I want to honor our time. Someone in the chat asked about support group in Cape Town. Please be in touch. If that is a need you have or an interest that you have, we'd love to hear from you on that. And please be in touch with Parent Reality. This is, as I said, a credible organization to partner with and to have. There's always podcasts, there's always blogs, there's always information. So we'd love to still be in touch with you. And we hope this was helpful. We hope our stories were helpful and helped you. Maybe everyone could turn their video on and we could just wave a goodbye. Please be in touch if you have any other questions. We're going to stop our video now, but please let us know if you want to still talk and if anything else is coming up for you. Yeah, I think that's it. We appreciate all of you. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for being on this time together. I'm trying to see if I can see all of you. That's what I'm trying to do now. Okay, I don't think I know how to do that. But we are going to conclude our time. Thank you so much, Kirsty, for being here. Thank you, Huda. Thank you, Bianca, for your wisdom and your stories. And may we all find safe places with boxes to sit in. and bugs on our desk. May we all find that. Thank you. Thanks, Yohani.
Thank you.
Oh, Haley's trying to get back in now. Thank you, everyone. And we'll share this video and all the information. So thanks so much for being here. Bye. Bye. Bye, Haley. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you very much.
Yeah, pleasure.